The great council chamber stretched across 5 kilometers of polished crystal, its walls reaching so high they disappeared into shadows above. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, each area designed to accommodate their unique biological needs. The Vorthec crystalline beings pulsed with soft blue light from their elevated platforms. The gaseous nebulans swirled within their containment fields. The metallic synthetics stood motionless as statues, their optical sensors glowing red in the dim light. At the center of it all, Ambassador Sarah Chun stood alone on the speaking platform. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her blue diplomatic uniform looked plain compared to the elaborate forms around her. She was human, and in this place, that made her an outsider. The charges against humanity have been read aloud for the past 3 hours. Border violations, aggressive expansion, failure to respect ancient territorial claims. The list went on and on. Sarah had listened to each accusation with growing anger, but she kept her face calm. Humans had learned long ago that showing emotion in this chamber was seen as a sign of weakness. "The evidence is clear," announced Counselor Vexthara, her crystalline voice ringing through the chamber like wind chimes. "The human species has shown time and again that they cannot coexist peacefully with established galactic civilization." Sarah stepped forward to the microphone. The technology translated her words into 47 different languages simultaneously, sending the meaning directly into the minds of species that had no ears to hear. "Honored counselors," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what was happening. "Humanity stands accused of crimes we did not commit. Every territorial dispute mentioned in these charges was initiated by Zeltharian forces moving into systems where humans had already established colonies." High Counselor Zethver rose from his throne-like seat. The Zeltharian leader was massive even by his species' standards, standing 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin that shifted between gold and silver. His voice boomed across the chamber. When he spoke, "The human claims are irrelevant. These systems were marked as Zeltharian expansion zones over 2,000 years ago, long before humans even discovered fire. The fact that they built colonies there does not grant them ownership. But under Galactic Law Statute 447, any species that establishes a permanent settlement has the right to—" Sarah tried to continue, but Zethver cut her off with a wave of his massive hand. "Human law, human interpretations, always trying to twist ancient wisdom to suit your brief existence." He turned to address the other council members. "Humanity has been part of galactic civilization for barely 2 centuries. They think their brief spark of technological achievement grants them equal standing with species that have maintained peace for millennia." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Sarah felt her heart sink as she watched the faces around her. The expressions varied by species, but the meaning was the same. They had already made their decision before this trial even began. Counselor Mortek of the Synthetic Collective spoke next, his electronic voice completely emotionless. "Analysis of human behavioral patterns shows 73.2% probability of future aggressive actions. Logic dictates preventive measures." "What preventive measures?" Sarah demanded. "What exactly are you proposing?" The chamber fell silent. Sarah could hear the hum of life support systems and the quiet whispers of translation technology. Finally, Counselor Vexthara spoke again. "Exile, complete removal of human presence from all Confederation space. You will have 60 standard days to withdraw all citizens, ships, and installations." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You can't be serious. There are over 40 billion humans living in Confederation space. Families who have called these worlds home for generations. Children who were born among the stars and have never seen Earth." "That is regrettable," Zethver said, though his tone suggested he found it anything but regrettable. "However, the safety of established galactic civilization must take priority over the convenience of a single species." Sarah looked around the chamber desperately. "Counselor Ethwin, your people traded with human colonies for over 50 years. Counselor Jareth, human doctors saved your homeworld from the plague 15 years ago. How can you support this madness? The Ethwen representative, a tall being covered in feathers that changed color with emotion, refused to meet her eyes. Jareth, whose slug-like form usually showed great expressiveness, remained still and silent. "The vote will now be called," announced the Speaker of the Council, an ancient being whose species had been extinct for centuries, but whose consciousness lived on in the chamber's computers. All in favor of Resolution 2387, the complete exile of humanity from Confederation space? One by one, the lights above each species section turned red. 46 votes in favor. Sarah watched in horror as even the species that humans had helped, traded with, and fought alongside cast their votes for exile. All opposed? A single green light appeared above the human section. Sarah's own vote, meaningless against the tide of judgment. "The resolution passes with overwhelming majority," the Speaker announced. "Humanity has 60 standard days to complete withdrawal from all Confederation space. Any human vessels remaining after this deadline will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." Sarah's hands shook as she gathered her documents. Around her, the representatives of 46 species began filing out, many of them talking quietly among themselves as if they had just voted on a minor trade regulation instead of condemning an entire civilization to exile. Ambassador Chun. The voice belonged to Counselor Ethwen, who had approached the speaking platform. Up close, Sarah could see that the alien's feathers were a deep purple, indicating shame or regret. "What?" Sarah's voice was colder than she intended. "My people, we did not wish for this outcome. But the pressure from the elder races was too great. If we had voted against exile, they might have turned on us next." Sarah stared at the feathered being for a long moment. "So you sacrificed us to save yourselves. It is the way of things in the galaxy. The strong survive, the weak are consumed. Humanity is young and has few allies. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when your species has proven itself—" "A few thousand years," Sarah repeated flatly. "How generous." She turned away without another word and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear Zethvar's booming laughter echoing through the chamber. The journey back to the human embassy took 20 minutes by transport pod. Sarah sat in silence, staring out at the massive space station that served as the Confederation's capital. Millions of beings from dozens of species lived and worked here. In 60 days, not a single one of them would be human. At the embassy, her staff was already packing. Word of the vote had spread quickly through the communication networks. Sarah's deputy, Ambassador Park, approached her with a grim expression. "The evacuation fleets are already being organized," he reported. "But Sarah, 60 days isn't enough time. We have colonies in over 200 systems. Industrial complexes, research stations, family settlements that have been established for generations." "They know that," Sarah replied quietly. "That's the point. They want to make this as painful as possible. A lesson to any other young species that might get ideas about challenging the established order." She walked to her office window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human families were receiving the news that they had to abandon everything they had built. Children were being told they could never return to the only homes they had ever known. Captain Marcus Webb's voice came through the communication system an hour later. His ship, the UES Retribution, was one of humanity's most advanced vessels, tasked with protecting human interests throughout Confederation space. "Ambassador, I'm requesting permission to maintain a small fleet presence after the deadline. If they want to force us out, let them try." Sarah closed her eyes. She could hear the anger in Webb's voice, the same anger she felt burning in her own chest. But starting a war with the entire Confederation would only lead to humanity's destruction. "Negative, Captain. We'll comply with their demands, for now." "For now?" Webb's voice carried a note of hope. "The galaxy is large, Captain. There are regions beyond Confederation space, places where we can rebuild, grow stronger, and remember what was done to us here today." 3 weeks later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the last human transport, leaving Confederation space. Below them, the planet of New Geneva was dark and empty. The cities that had housed 15 million humans just days before were abandoned, their lights extinguished. As the transport entered hyperspace, Sarah made a promise to herself and to her species. Humanity would survive this exile. They would grow stronger in the darkness between the stars. And someday, when they were ready, they would return. The Confederation had wanted them gone. They would get their wish. But they should have been more careful about what they wished for. Because the humans who returned would not be the same ones who had been cast out. They would be something far more dangerous. They would be a species with nothing left to lose and a very long memory. The last human ship disappeared into the void, carrying 40 billion exiles toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the Confederation celebrated the beginning of their great peace. They had no idea they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. The asteroid belt that would become humanity's first major stronghold had no name when the survey ships found it. The rocks floating in the void around a dying red star held no value to the Confederation. No rare minerals, no habitable worlds. Nothing but empty space and radiation that would kill most known species within hours. For humans, it was perfect. Dr. Elena Vasquez floated in the zero-gravity laboratory aboard Research Station Alpha, watching through the reinforced windows as mining ships carved massive chunks from the largest asteroids. 5 years had passed since the exile began, and humanity had learned to make homes in places that other species considered uninhabitable. The quantum resonance is stable, reported her assistant, Dr. Kim Chun, daughter of the former ambassador. The new drive system should be ready for testing within the month. Elena nodded, her attention focused on the data flowing across her screens. The exile had forced humanity to innovate in ways they never would have attempted while living comfortably in Confederation space. Without access to established trade routes and technology exchanges, human scientists had been forced to develop everything from scratch. The results were remarkable. "Show me the stealth field readings again," Elena said. Kim manipulated the holographic display, showing a test ship that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. The subspace displacement field bends light and sensor waves around the vessel. To any outside observer, there's nothing there, and the crew, completely unaffected. The field creates a pocket of normal space around the ship. They can see out, but nothing can see in, Elena smiled grimly. The Confederation had forced humanity into exile, believing they were removing a minor threat. They had no idea they were creating a major one. 3 systems away, Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Taz Unity, humanity's first ship built entirely during the exile years. The vessel bore no resemblance to the clean, standardized designs favored by Confederation species. Instead, it looked like something grown rather than built, its hull flowing in organic curves that seemed to shift and change depending on the viewing angle. "Status report," she ordered. Commander Torres stepped forward, his face serious. "The Zeltharian patrol just completed its sweep of the Kepler sector. They found nothing?" Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Of course they didn't. Our ships were right there watching them, and they never knew it." The irony was not lost on her. The Zeltharians had taken over former human colonies immediately after the exile, claiming the worlds and all the infrastructure humanity had built over decades. Now those same Zeltharians were patrolling territory they thought was secure, never realizing that human scout ships were observing their every move. "Any word from the deep space monitoring stations?" Sarah asked, all quiet on the Confederation border. "No signs they suspect anything. As far as they know, humanity is still licking its wounds somewhere in the outer rim." Sarah walked to the main view screen, where she could see the construction yards floating in the void. Massive ships were taking shape there, vessels that dwarfed anything humanity had built before the exile. Each one incorporated technology that the Confederation would consider impossible. The exile had done something unexpected to humanity. Instead of breaking them, it had united them. The old divisions between Earth nations, colonial factions, and corporate interests had melted away in the face of common survival. Every human settlement, no matter how small or remote, contributed to the collective effort. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Park from the communications station. "We're receiving a transmission from Dr. Vasquez. She says the new drive system is ready for field testing." "Excellent. Tell her to proceed, but maintain communication blackout protocols. I want no trace of our activities reaching Confederation space." On a world that had once been a garden paradise, now turned into a fortress, General Marcus Webb reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The man who had once been Captain Webb had been promoted repeatedly as humanity's military forces expanded. During the exile years, his hair was now streaked with gray, and his eyes held a hardness that had not been there during the evacuation. "They're getting comfortable," he said to his intelligence chief, Colonel Morrison. "The Confederation thinks they solved their human problem 15 years ago." Morrison nodded, spreading holographic displays across the briefing table. "Our deep cover agents report that military preparedness throughout Confederation space is at its lowest point in centuries. They've reduced patrol schedules, decommissioned older vessels, and converted military installations to civilian use, and the Zeltharians completely focused on exploiting the former human territories. They've tripled their population in those systems, built massive industrial complexes, and established what they're calling the Golden Age of Expansion." Webb's jaw tightened. "Built on the bones of human settlements they destroyed." "There's more, sir." "Our agents have documented systematic persecution of any humans who couldn't evacuate during the 60-day deadline. Forced labor camps, medical experiments, public executions for resistance activities." The general was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was deadly calm. "How many?" "Best estimates suggest over 2 million humans were left behind when the deadline expired. Current population in Zeltharian captivity is approximately 300,000. Webb closed his eyes. 1.7 million dead. Men, women, and children who had been abandoned when the evacuation fleets ran out of time. The Confederation had known this would happen. They had planned for it, sir." Morrison's voice was concerned. "Your orders: continue monitoring, document everything. When the time comes, every single death will be accounted for." In the depths of space, far from any star or planet, the Terran Ascendancy held its first full assembly. Representatives from every human settlement, research station, and fleet gathering had come together in a massive space station built specifically for this purpose. The station itself was a marvel of engineering. Constructed using materials and techniques developed during the exile years, former Ambassador Sarah Chun, now Prime Minister of the Terran Ascendancy, stood before the assembled delegates. The woman who had once pleaded humanity's case before the Confederation was gone, replaced by someone harder, more focused, and absolutely committed to ensuring that humanity would never again be at the mercy of others. 15 years ago, we were cast out of galactic civilization like unwanted children," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "We were told we were too young, too violent, too unpredictable to deserve a place among the established species." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Every person present had lost something during the exile. Homes, friends, family, members who couldn't make the journey. The pain was shared, and it had forged them into something new. "They were wrong about us, but they were right about one thing: we have changed. The humans who were exiled are not the humans who will return." She activated a holographic display showing the extent of human expansion during the exile years. Red dots marked settlements, research stations, and military installations scattered across thousands of light years. What had once been a species concentrated in a few hundred systems had become something spread across the galaxy's edge. We have built something they never imagined. Not an empire based on conquest, but a civilization based on unity. Every human settlement, no matter how small, is connected to every other. Every advance in technology, every discovery, every success is shared among all of us. The display changed, showing ship designs and technological innovations that would have seemed like magic to the Confederation species. We have learned to live in environments that would kill our enemies. We have developed technologies they cannot understand. We have become something they never expected us to become. She paused, looking out at the faces of humanity's leaders. Scientists, military officers, colonists, engineers, and explorers who had spent 15 years turning exile into opportunity. But we have not forgotten what was done to us. We have not forgotten the families torn apart, the world stolen, the people left behind to die in Zeltharian camps. Justice has been delayed, but it will not be denied. The chamber erupted in cheers. Admiral Chun stepped forward to present the military assessment. Our fleet strength now exceeds anything the Confederation has ever seen, she reported. We have over 10,000 vessels of various classes, all incorporating stealth technology that makes them invisible to conventional sensors. More importantly, we have achieved something no other species has managed. The holographic display showed a new type of ship, its design so alien that it seemed to hurt the eyes to look at directly. Dimensional phase technology. Our ships can exist partially outside normal space, making them effectively untouchable by conventional weapons while still able to strike at targets in our dimension. Gasps of amazement filled the chamber. Even many of the delegates were seeing this technology for the first time. How is this possible? Asked Dr. Kim Chun, now director of Colonial Research. Admiral Chun smiled grimly. Necessity, desperation, and 15 years of being forced to innovate or die. The Confederation species became comfortable with their technology thousands of years ago. They stopped pushing boundaries, stopped taking risks. We never had that luxury. Prime Minister Chun returned to the podium. The question now is not whether we can return to Confederation space. The question is when and what we will do when we get there. The chamber fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. This was no longer about revenge for its own sake. Humanity had become something that could reshape the galaxy. We will return, she continued, but not as the desperate species that was cast out. We will return as the guardians of a new order. An order where no species will ever again be exiled for the convenience of their neighbors. General Webb stood up in the military section. What are your orders, Prime Minister? Begin the final preparations. It's time for the galaxy to discover what humanity has become. In the years that followed that assembly, human activity intensified throughout their hidden territories. Ships moved through subspace corridors that the Confederation didn't know existed. Scout vessels penetrated deep into enemy territory, mapping defenses and identifying targets. The exile that was supposed to have removed humanity from galactic affairs had instead created something far more dangerous. The Confederation continued to enjoy their great peace, unaware that they were being watched by an enemy they had created through their own short-sighted cruelty. The Zeltharians expanded further into former human space, building monuments to their own glory on the graves of human settlements. But in the darkness between the stars, humanity was coming, and when they arrived, they would bring with them 15 years of innovation, determination, and cold fury at the injustices they had suffered. The exile was ending. The reckoning was about to begin. Science Officer Cathenal had been monitoring the deep space sensors for over 30 years. Her crystalline form pulsed with a steady blue light as she worked through the night shift aboard the Confederation's most advanced monitoring station. The facility orbited a dead world at the edge of known space, its powerful sensors designed to detect any threat that might emerge from the unknown regions beyond. For 15 years, those sensors had shown nothing but empty space. The human exile had been so complete that not even a single scout ship had been detected trying to return. The Confederation leadership had declared it proof that humanity had either died out in the hostile regions beyond civilization or had finally learned their place. Cathenal had never believed that. She had studied human behavior during their brief time in Confederation space. They were stubborn, creative, and remarkably good at surviving in conditions that would kill most other species. The complete silence from the exile regions worried her more than any aggressive probe would have. The first anomaly appeared at 0347 hours on a routine sensor sweep. A gravitational distortion that lasted exactly 2.3 seconds before vanishing. Kethanol S sensors indicated something massive had passed through hyperspace nearby. But when she focused the array on the location, she found nothing. Computer, analyze. Gravitational anomaly at coordinates 847.3 by 192.7. The station's artificial intelligence processed the data for several minutes before responding. Analysis complete. Gravitational signature consistent with object measuring approximately 50 kilometers in length, mass equivalent to Class A Dreadnought battle group. No visual or energy signatures detected. Kethanol S light flickered with confusion. That's impossible. Nothing that large could move through hyperspace without generating massive energy signatures. Confirmed. Current sensor readings show no energy signatures consistent with known propulsion systems. Over the next 6 hours, 3 more similar anomalies appeared at different points along the border. Each one showed the same pattern: massive gravitational disturbance with no corresponding energy signature. It was as if enormous ghost ships were moving through hyperspace, visible only by the space they displaced. Kethanol sent her initial report to Confederation Command with a priority flag attached. The response came back within an hour, ordering her to run full diagnostics on all equipment and file. A corrected report once the obvious sensor malfunctions had been identified, but the sensors were working perfectly. 2 days later, visual observation. Specialist Quinter was reviewing routine patrol footage from the Vega sector when she spotted something that made her 8 eyes dilate with shock. In the background of a routine cargo vessel inspection, something had moved past the patrol ship. Something that bent light around itself like heated air, creating a barely visible distortion against the stars. She ran the footage through enhancement filters, adjusting for every known form of stealth technology in the Confederation database. The shape that emerged was impossible. A vessel over 30 kilometers long, moving with the grace of a living creature despite its enormous size. Its hull seemed to shift and flow, never maintaining the same configuration for more than a few seconds. "Bridge to analysis," she called, through the ship's communication system. "I need immediate verification on visual contact." Captain Veldan arrived at her station within minutes, his 4 arms working the controls with practiced efficiency. "What am I looking at, Specialist?" "Unknown vessel, sir. Estimated length 30 kilometers, configuration unknown, using stealth technology not in our database." The captain's skin shifted from its normal green to an alarmed yellow. "Pirates?" "No. Sir, this is too advanced. Too large, and look at this." She manipulated the display to show the object's movement pattern. "It's not following any known hyperspace lane. It's moving through normal space, but somehow avoiding detection by the patrol ship's sensors." Captain Veldan stared at the display for several minutes. "Send this to Confederation intelligence immediately. Full encryption, highest priority." 3 hours later, every major Confederation facility received the same urgent message. Unknown. Vessels of enormous size were moving through their territory using technology that surpassed anything in their database. The ships appeared to be observing Confederation activities. While remaining effectively invisible, panic spread through the command structure. Emergency sessions were called. Defense fleets were placed on high alert, despite increased patrols and sensor sweeps. No direct contact was made with the mysterious vessels. Admiral Thekvar of the Zeltharian Empire stood in his command center, reviewing reports from across their expanded territory. His species had grown fat and comfortable during the 15 years since humanity's exile. The former human worlds had provided incredible wealth, and the Zeltharians had used that wealth to build the largest military force in Confederation space. Status. "Report?" he demanded. His aide, a younger Zeltharian named Breakter, approached with obvious nervousness. "Sir, we've now had confirmed sightings in 17 different systems. Always the same pattern: enormous vessels using unknown stealth technology, observing our activities but making no aggressive moves." "Pirates wouldn't have access to such technology," Thekvar mused. "And they certainly wouldn't have ships of that size. What do our intelligence analysts think?" "They "Re-dotted, sir. Some believe it might be a previously unknown species emerging from the unexplored regions." Others think it could be some kind of Confederation black project that's gone rogue. Dekvar's golden skin darkened with anger. Fools. There are no unknown species with that level of technology. And the Confederation couldn't keep a project of this magnitude secret. He paused, a terrible thought occurring to him. What about the humans? Breakter's skin turned pale. Sir, the humans were exiled 15 years ago. Our intelligence indicates. They barely managed to establish basic survival colonies in the Outer Rim. They lack the resources or technology for anything like this. Show me the files on human technological development during their time in Confederation space. The holographic display filled with data. Human advancement had been rapid during their 2 centuries of galactic civilization, but it had also been limited by their reliance on Confederation technology and resources. Their most advanced vessels had been barely a kilometer in length, using conventional propulsion and weapon systems. This can't be human technology, Breakter said with relief. They're centuries away from developing anything like what we're seeing. But Dekvar was studying the movement patterns of the unknown vessels. There was something familiar about their behavior, something that reminded him of human military tactics from the border conflicts that had led to their exile. Double all patrols in the former human territories, he ordered, and send a message to High Command. I want a full review of our assumptions about human capabilities. On the Confederation capital station, High Counselor Zethver convened an emergency session of the Inner Council. The most powerful leaders from the major species gathered in a secure chamber, their faces showing varying degrees of concern and confusion. The situation is unprecedented, announced Intelligence Director Mukhtar, a synthetic whose logical processes were considered incapable of error. We are dealing with vessels that exceed our largest dreadnoughts by a factor of 10, using stealth, technology that renders them effectively invisible to our most advanced sensors. Who could have developed such capabilities? Asked Counselor Vexthara, her crystalline form pulsing with anxiety. Analysis indicates 3 possibilities, Mukhtar replied. First, an unknown species from beyond explored space. Second, a secret project by one of our member species. Third, external intervention by a power we have not previously encountered. What about the humans? The question came from Counselor Jareth, whose slug-like form was tense with worry. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter went through the chamber. The humans were exiled 15 years ago, Zethver said dismissively. Our intelligence reports show they're struggling to maintain basic colonies in the Outer Rim. They lack the resources for even simple interstellar travel, let alone vessels of this magnitude. But Mukhtar's optical sensors focused on a data stream that had just appeared on his internal displays. Counselors, I am receiving an urgent transmission from our monitoring stations. The unknown vessels they're decloaking. The chamber's main display activated, showing feeds from dozens of sensor stations throughout Confederation space. On every screen, massive ships were becoming visible, their stealth fields dropping simultaneously across hundreds of light years. The vessels were unlike anything the Confederation had ever seen. They moved like living things, their hulls flowing and shifting in patterns that seemed to follow organic rhythms rather than mechanical engineering. Each ship was a work of art and terror, beautiful in its alien design but clearly built for war. Mother of crystals, whispered Vexthara. How many of them are there? The answer came from tracking stations across the galaxy. Thousands of ships, ranging from kilometer-long scouts to massive vessels that dwarfed the largest Confederation installations. They had been watching, observing, studying every aspect of Confederation military and civilian activity. And they had done it without being detected until they chose to reveal themselves. Sir, Mukhtar's voice had taken on a tone that his programming rarely allowed uncertainty. I'm receiving a transmission. It's being broadcast simultaneously to every communication network in Confederation space. Put it through. The display changed to show a single human woman standing in what appeared to be the command center of one of the massive vessels. She was older than the humans the Confederation remembered, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes held a depth and power that had not been there during the exile. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and absolutely terrifying in its certainty. I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Ascendancy. 15 years ago, you cast us out of galactic civilization, believing you were removing a minor inconvenience. You celebrated what you called the Great Peace, built on the exile of an entire species. Zethvar's massive form had gone completely still. Around the chamber, the other counselors stared at the display in growing horror. During our exile, we have grown, we have learned. We have become something you never imagined we could become. The ships you now see represent a fraction of our true capabilities. The display switched to show star maps marking human positions throughout the galaxy. Red dots appeared not just in the outer rim, but deep within Confederation space itself. They were everywhere. You wanted us gone, you have your wish. The humans you exiled no longer exist. In their place stands the Terran Ascendancy, guardians of a new galactic order. Admiral Chun's image returned to the screen. Behind her, other humans could be seen working at stations that seemed to blend technology with something approaching art. They moved with confidence and purpose that spoke of absolute unity. You have 72 hours to respond to our request. For negotiations, we suggest you use this time wisely. The transmission ended, leaving the Confederation leadership in stunned silence. Zethvar was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. What have we done? Outside the station's windows, space that had appeared empty moments before now showed dozens of massive human vessels, their hulls gleaming with technologies that seemed to bend reality around them. They had been there all along, watching, waiting. The exile was over. The reckoning had begun. The Confederation's fastest diplomatic vessel, the Harmonious Unity, approached the human fleet with all weapons powered down and shields inactive. Captain Rithek had volunteered for this mission knowing it might be her last. The massive human. Ships that surrounded them defied every law of physics. She understood. Ambassador Kelter floated in his environmental suit within the ship's main chamber, his gaseous form rippling with nervous energy. As the most skilled diplomat in the Nebulan Collective, he had been chosen to make first contact with whatever humanity had become. The responsibility weighed heavily on his consciousness. Distance to the human flagship? He asked through the ship's communication system. 200 kilometers in closing, replied Captain Rithek. Sir, I'm reading energy signatures that don't match anything in our database. The ship we're approaching appears to be generating its own gravity field. And, something else. Something that's making our sensors give impossible readings. Through the viewports, the human flagship grew larger with each passing moment. The vessel called itself the Inevitability, a name that seemed both beautiful and threatening. Its hull seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, shifting between solid metal and something that looked like captured starlight. Receiving transmission from the human vessel, reported the communications officer. They're requesting permission to bring us aboard. Kelter's form swirled with uncertainty. Aboard? How is that possible? Our environmental requirements are completely different from human needs. Sir, they're saying they can accommodate any form of life. They're transmitting technical specifications for a docking bay that can modify itself to meet our needs. 20 minutes later, Kelter found himself floating through corridors that seemed impossible. The walls shifted and flowed around him, creating pockets of the gas mixture his species required while maintaining the atmosphere needed by his escorts. The technology was so advanced it seemed like magic. Human crew members passed them in the corridors, but these were not the humans the Confederation remembered. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of perfect health and coordination. Their eyes held depths that suggested they had seen things beyond normal understanding. Some of them seemed to glow with a faint inner light. This way, Ambassador, said their escort, a human woman whose voice carried harmonics that resonated through dimensions. Admiral Chun is waiting for you. The conference room they entered existed outside normal space and time. Kelter's instruments could not measure its dimensions or determine what materials composed its walls. Gravity flowed in gentle currents that accommodated both his gaseous form and the humans who awaited him. Admiral Sarah Chien sat at the head of a table that seemed to be carved from crystallized starlight. She appeared unchanged by the 15 years since the exile, though her eyes held experiences that spoke of journeys beyond normal comprehension. Around the table sat other human officials, each one radiating the same sense of controlled power. Ambassador Kelter, Admiral Chun said, her voice carrying impossible harmonics that translated directly into meaning in his mind. Welcome aboard the Inevitability. I trust your journey was comfortable? Admiral Chun, Kelter replied, trying to keep his nervousness from showing in his gas patterns. The Confederation Council has sent me to open negotiations regarding our return to galactic civilization. A smile played at the corners of Chun's mouth. Our return? Is that what they're calling it? The Council recognizes that the exile may have been hasty. They are prepared to discuss terms for humanity's reintegration into Confederation space. The humans around the table exchanged glances. Several of them seemed to be communicating without words, their thoughts flowing between them in ways that Kelter's instruments could detect but not interpret. Tell me, Ambassador, Chun said, leaning forward slightly. What do you know about what happened to the humans who couldn't evacuate during your 60-day deadline? Kelter's form rippled with discomfort. That is a tragic chapter that the Council would prefer to address through proper diplomatic channels. I see, and what about the forced labor camps the Zeltharians established on our former worlds, the medical experiments, the public executions for resistance activities? Admiral, these are serious accusations that would require investigation. We don't need investigations, Ambassador. Chun gestured, and the air in the center of the room filled with holographic images. We have 17 years of detailed surveillance footage. Every atrocity, every murder, every act of cruelty committed against the humans you abandoned. The images were horrifying. Humans in chains, working in mines that would have been closed as unsafe for any other species. Families separated, children taken from their parents for genetic research. Mass graves where the bodies of humans who had dared to resist were buried. Kelter's gaseous form contracted with shock. This cannot be accurate. The Confederation would never allow such treatment of sentient beings. The Confederation didn't just allow it, said General Marcus Webb, speaking for the first time. They sanctioned it. Every request for prisoner exchanges was denied. Every plea for basic humanitarian treatment was ignored. The Zeltharians were given complete authority over human criminals in their territory. Admiral Chun waved her hand, and the images disappeared. 1.7 million dead, Ambassador. That's the price of your great peace. What do you want? Kelter asked, though he feared the answer. What we've always wanted, Chun replied. Justice, recognition, and the guarantee that no species will ever again be cast out for the convenience of their betters. She stood, and as she did, the walls of the conference room became transparent, showing the space around them. Kelter's sensors went wild as he saw what surrounded the Confederation's core worlds. Hundreds of human ships, each one larger and more advanced than anything in the Confederation fleet. You see, Ambassador, exile taught us many things. It taught us self-reliance. It taught us unity. Most importantly, it taught us that the galaxy is far larger and more dangerous than the Confederation ever imagined. How did you develop such technology? Kelter whispered. Chun's smile was cold as the void between stars. Necessity, desperation, and the simple fact that we had nothing left to lose. When you stripped away our comfortable reliance on Confederation technology, we were forced to innovate or die. General Webb activated another display showing the scope of human expansion during the exile years. We found things out there in the dark. Ancient ruins, abandoned technologies, energy sources that your species never bothered to look for because you were content with what you had. We also found other species, added Dr. Elena Vasquez, now Director of Scientific Development. Races that had been cast out by previous Confederation councils or that had chosen isolation rather than submit to your rules. They taught us much about survival and adaptation. Kelter's form was swirling with panic. The council, they thought humanity had barely survived the exile. Our intelligence report suggested you were struggling with basic colonization. Your intelligence report showed you exactly what we wanted them to show, Chun said calmly. Every piece of information your spies gathered was carefully crafted to reinforce your assumptions about human weakness. The Admiral walked to the window, looking out at the fleet that surrounded them. You see, Ambassador, we learned something important during our exile. The strong don't always survive through force. Sometimes they survive by making their enemies underestimate them until it's too late to matter. What are your demands? Kelter asked, his voice barely audible. Demands? Jem turned back to him, her expression unreadable. We're not making demands, Ambassador. We're offering choices. She gestured, and the holographic display showed the Confederation's military positions throughout their territory. Red markers indicated human ships that had positioned themselves at every major installation. Choice 1. The Confederation leadership. Submits to trial for crimes against sentience. Reparations are paid to all affected species. The exile protocols are abolished forever. And a new galactic government is established based on equality rather than the dominance of elder races. Kelter's sensors detected massive energy buildups throughout the human fleet. Whatever weapons these ships carried, they were preparing to use them. Choice 2. We demonstrate why the galaxy's youngest species has become its most dangerous. And then we implement the same changes by force. You're talking about war against the entire Confederation, Kelter said desperately. Even with your advanced technology, you cannot possibly defeat 47 different species. 47 species, Chun repeated thoughtfully. Tell me, Ambassador, how many of those species actually supported our exile and how many simply voted with the majority out of fear? The question hit Kelter like a physical blow. He knew the answer. Most of the smaller species had voted for exile reluctantly, terrified that opposing the elder races would make them the next targets. You see, Chun continued, we've spent 15 years studying not just your military capabilities, but your political weaknesses. We know which species resent Zeltharian dominance. We know which races have been quietly oppressed by the current system. We know exactly how fragile your great peace really is. She walked back to the table and sat down. We're not here to conquer the galaxy, Ambassador. We're here to liberate it from a system that values convenience over justice. How long? Do we have to decide? Kelter asked. You had 72 hours from our initial broadcast. That was 18 hours ago? The ambassador's form contracted with urgency. I need to return to the council immediately. Of course, Chun stood. But before you go, there's one more thing you should see. The room's walls shifted, showing a view of Confederation space from above. Kelter could see the positions of every major fleet, every defensive installation, every important world, and surrounding all of it, like a web of light, were the positions of human ships. We've been watching you for 15 years, Chun said quietly. We know your strengths, your weaknesses, your plans, and your fears. We know which of your admirals are competent and which are political appointees. We know where your weapons are manufactured and where your food is grown. She looked directly at Kelter, her eyes reflecting depths that seemed to contain stars. The exile is over, Ambassador. The only question now is whether the new galaxy will be born through negotiation or through fire. Kelter left the human flagship with his mind reeling. As the harmonious unity accelerated toward Confederation space, he looked back at the massive human vessels that had allowed them to approach and leave unharmed. The humans could have destroyed them at any moment. They could have simply taken whatever they wanted by force. Instead, they had offered choices, even if those choices were limited. As he began composing his report to the Confederation Council, Kelter realized that the humans had already won. Not through superior firepower, though they clearly possessed that, but through superior preparation and absolute unity of purpose. The galaxy was about to change forever, and there was nothing the Confederation could do to stop it. The emergency session of the Confederation Council began 12 hours after Ambassador Kelter returned with his report. High Counselor Zephyr called the meeting with a voice that shook despite his attempts to maintain dignity. The massive Zeltharian leader had not slept since learning what humanity had become during their exile. "The human ultimatum is clear," Zephyr announced to the assembled representatives. "Submit to their demands or face military action. We have 36 hours remaining to provide our answer." Counselor Vexvara S. crystalline form pulsed with nervous energy. "Their technology surpasses our understanding. Our military analysts estimate their fleet could defeat our combined forces within days. Then we surrender?" demanded Admiral Vekvar, who had arrived from the Zeltharian Empire's core worlds. "We bow to these primitives who were exiled for good reason." "Good reason?" The voice came from Counselor Ethwin, whose feathered form had turned the deep red of anger. "We exiled them because they inconvenienced the established order, because they asked questions we didn't want to answer." Murmurs spread through the chamber as long-suppressed tensions finally surfaced. For 15 years, the smaller species had remained silent about their reservations regarding the human exile. Now, faced with the consequences, old grievances emerged. They were troublemakers, Vekvar insisted, always pushing boundaries, demanding equal treatment despite their youth as a species. "Equal treatment," repeated Counselor Jareth, his slug-like form rippling with emotion. "Something we denied them then, and something we've denied others since." Zephyr raised his massive hands for silence. "The question before us is not whether we were right or wrong 15 years ago. The question is how we respond to their current demands." Intelligence Director Mokhtar activated the central display, showing tactical assessments of human capabilities. Analysis indicates resistance would be futile. Their vessels demonstrate technology centuries beyond our current level. More concerning, our deep space monitors have detected similar vessels emerging from previously unexplored regions. "What does that mean?" asked Vexthara. "It means humanity was not exiled to empty space. They found allies out there. Other species, other technologies, other resources. The humans we face now are not just one species, they represent something larger." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans had not simply survived exile. They had built something new, something that included species and technologies the Confederation had never encountered. "Sir," called a communications officer from the chamber's edge, "we're receiving another transmission from the human fleet." Admiral Chin's image appeared on the central display, but she was not alone. Beside her stood beings the Confederation had never seen before, species that seemed to be made of living crystal, others that appeared to exist partially in other dimensions, and creatures that defied easy description. "Confederation Council," Chun began, her voice carrying the same impossible harmonics they remembered. "You have 24 hours remaining to provide your answer. However, we thought you should understand the full scope of what you're deciding." The display shifted to show star maps covering regions the Confederation had never explored. Thousands of systems, hundreds of species, all marked with the symbol of the Terran ascendancy. "The galaxy is much larger than your small corner of space," Chun continued. "During our exile, we discovered civilizations that had been destroyed by expansion-hungry empires. Species that had been cast out by previous galactic governments, entire regions that had been strip-mined and abandoned. The images were devastating. Dead worlds covered in industrial waste. Space graveyards filled with the debris of extinct civilizations. Systems where nothing remained but radioactive dust. This is what your model of galactic government leads." "Tio," Chun said quietly. "The strong consume the weak until there is nothing left but ruins." General Webb stepped forward. "The Terran ascendancy offers a different path. Unity instead of dominance. Justice instead of convenience. Protection for all species instead of privilege for the few." "What guarantee do we have?" Zephyr called out. "That humanity won't simply become the new oppressor?" Chun's smile was sad rather than threatening. "Because we know what it feels like to be the oppressed. Because we remember what it's like to beg for mercy and receive none? The display changed again, showing the construction of massive installations throughout the galaxy's previously unexplored regions. Cities that housed dozens of different species, research facilities where knowledge was shared freely, defensive, networks that protected entire sectors from outside threats. We didn't spend 15 years preparing for revenge, Chun explained. We spent 15 years building something better. 3 hours later, Admiral Thekvar stood before the largest Zeltharian fleet ever assembled. Over 3,000 ships filled the void around the capital world of the Zeltharian Empire. Every vessel was armed with the most advanced weapons the Confederation possessed. Admiral, called his communications officer, the Council is still in session. No orders have been given for military action. The Council has lost its nerve, Thekvar replied coldly. The Zeltharian Empire will not bow to human demands. If the Council won't act, we will. He turned to address his fleet commanders through the communication network. Today we face an enemy that believes technology makes them invincible. They will learn that courage and honor matter more than advanced weapons. The fleet began moving toward the human positions, their engines lighting up the darkness with thousands of points of light. It was a magnificent sight, the largest display of military power in Zeltharian history. It lasted exactly 17 minutes. The human response was not what anyone expected. There was no massive battle, no exchange of devastating weapons. Instead, the Zeltharian ships simply stopped working, one by one. The fleet's vessels found their engines shutting down, their weapons powering off, their life support systems switching to emergency backup. They drifted helplessly in space, completely intact but utterly unable to function. What's happening? Thekvar demanded as his own flagship fell silent around him. The answer came in the form of human vessels decloaking around the Zeltharian fleet. The ships that appeared were unlike anything seen in the previous encounters. These vessels seemed to exist in multiple realities simultaneously, their hulls shifting between dimensions. Admiral Chun's voice filled every ship in the Zeltharian fleet simultaneously. Your vessels are undamaged, your crews are unharmed. You are simply unable to continue this course of action. How? Thekvar whispered. Quantum field manipulation, Chun replied, somehow hearing his question across space. We can control the fundamental forces that make your technology function. Your ships exist because we allow them to exist. The demonstration was complete. The Zeltharian Empire's greatest fleet had been neutralized without a single shot being fired, without a single life being lost. The message was clear. Resistance was not just futile, it was pointless. Admiral Thekvar, Chun continued, you have a choice. Order your fleet to stand down and return to your homeworlds. Or we will disable every piece of technology in the Zeltharian Empire until your people understand that the age of conquest is over. On his darkened bridge, surrounded by powerless systems, Thekvar finally understood what humanity had become. This was not about revenge or domination. This was about establishing a new order where such displays of military force were simply impossible. All ships, he said quietly into his emergency communicator. Stand down, return to base. 6 months later, the trial of High Counselor Zephyr began in a court unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The proceedings were held aboard a massive station constructed specifically for the purpose. With representatives from over 200 species serving as observers, the evidence presented was overwhelming. 15 years of detailed documentation showing not just the human exile, but decades of systematic oppression throughout Confederation space, species forced into economic slavery, worlds stripped of resources while their inhabitants starved, entire civilizations erased from history when they proved inconvenient. Zephyr sat in the defendant's chair, his massive form diminished by the weight of evidence against him. Beside him sat other Confederation leaders, all facing charges of crimes against sentience. The pattern is clear, stated Chief Prosecutor Elena Vasquez, now serving as Director of Galactic Justice. The Confederation government operated on the principle that might makes right. They ruled through fear, maintained power through oppression, and justified their actions by claiming they were preserving peace. The trial was broadcast throughout the galaxy, reaching species that had never known such proceedings were possible. For the first time, smaller civilizations saw their oppressors held accountable for their actions, but humanity's justice was not the genocide many had expected. When the verdicts were announced, they came with opportunities for redemption rather than simple punishment. Zethver of the Zeltharian Empire, Admiral Chun announced as she delivered the sentence, you are found guilty of crimes against 47 different species over a period of 70 years. The traditional punishment for such crimes would be death. The massive Zeltharian leader closed his eyes, accepting his fate. However, Chun continued, the Terran ascendancy believes in redemption as well as justice. You will spend the rest of your life working to repair the damage you have caused. You will serve the species you oppressed under their direction and supervision until they judge that you have made adequate amends. Similar sentences were handed down to other Confederation leaders. Not death, not imprisonment, but service. They would use their knowledge and resources to help rebuild what they had destroyed. The transformation of galactic civilization began immediately. The old Confederation was dissolved, replaced by the Galactic Assembly, where every species, regardless of size or technological level, had an equal voice. The Terran ascendancy provided the military force necessary to maintain peace, but they did not rule. Instead, they served as guardians, protectors who ensured that no species would ever again face the choice between submission and exile on worlds. Throughout the galaxy, monuments were erected to commemorate the change. Not monuments to human victory, but memorials to the principle that justice delayed is not justice denied. Former Ambassador Sarah Chun, now Elder Counselor of the Galactic Assembly, stood before one such monument on the anniversary of the human return. The inscription was simple but powerful. Never again will the strong oppress the weak for the convenience of peace. Beside her stood representatives from dozens of species, including many who had once voted for humanity's exile. They had learned, sometimes through bitter experience, that true peace could only exist when it was built on justice rather than oppression. Was it worth it? Asked former Counselor Ethwin, whose people had become some of humanity's strongest allies. 15 years of exile, all that suffering just to reach this point? Chiun looked up at the stars where human ships maintained their silent vigil over galactic civilization. Every child who grows up free because of what we built here makes it worth it. Every species that no longer fears extinction for opposing their betters makes it worth it. She turned to face the assembled representatives. We were cast out because we inconvenienced the established order. We returned to ensure that the established order would never again be more important than justice. The galaxy had its peace now. Not the false peace built on the silence of the oppressed, but the true peace that came from knowing that justice would always be enforced. The age of convenient exile was over. The age of universal protection had begun. And in the darkness between stars, humanity maintained its watch, ensuring that the lessons learned through suffering would never be forgotten.